We're clicking go live. It says you're live. We're off to the races. Thanks, Will.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
All right, can you have a motion? Susan Black?
I move that we reconvene into open session.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Lorene, aye, ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is order of business. There are no public appearances today. And I have a motion for the consent agenda.
I
Susan?
move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Lorene, aye, ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next are recognitions.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start by recognizing three teachers who are retiring that you just approved in the consent agenda. Eve Ertelbeck is currently a reading teacher at Taylor Prairie School, and she'll be retiring after 8 years in the district. Paul Backstrom, who is currently a general music teacher at Cottage Grove School, retiring after 25 years in the district. And Lynn Hanson, school nurse for our Cottage Grove schools, also retiring at the end of the year, also 25 years of service. And of course, all were certainly thrilled and happy for all three of these individuals. And I can't help but make special mention of the work of Lynn during these last 2 years of our pandemic, and we're so grateful for her work, as again with all of our staff, but all well-deserved, and we wish all three of those individuals the best. Okay, and then we also have some student recognitions. Congratulations to the Monona Grove High School Science Olympiad team for a great showing at their regional competition. Team won 5 medals in total, including a first place finish in virology for Catherine Pinnell and Annie Bernards. And great job to the whole team on a solid performance. 7th grader Aidan Faywiger and 6th grader Isaac McHone competed in the Regional Science Olympiad Tournament at Marquette High School on Saturday, February 12th. Aidan created his own musical instrument in the Sound of Music event, and Isaac created and programmed a robot for the Robocross event. Isaac won a gold medal for his submission, and both Isaac and Aidan will compete in the Wisconsin State Science Olympiad Tournament at the University UW Stevens Point in April. Monona Grove boys swim and dive team ended in 6th place overall at their sectional championship and went on to compete in the state championships on February 19th. Swimmers Cameron Tejeda, Hayden McGlynn, Ethan Johnson, Jonah Elfers, and Caleb Jondal took home 18th place at the state competition. They had an amazing season, so congratulations to the team. 3rd graders at Winnequa braved the snow as they went outside for a lesson on snowshoeing. They learned all the different components of a snowshoe and then took an adventure to see how all the parts work together. And there's also linked to some photos of the students in action for you. And Rocky, Ms. Friesman's therapy dog, spread smiles in the halls of GDS once a week, greeting students. He spends the rest of his day in Ms. Friesman's 7th grade classroom, where he provides a gentle presence and a calming atmosphere for students and staff alike. The Wisconsin State Journal recently covered Rocky's impact at Glacial Drumlin School. And then today happens to be Rocky's birthday, and he got to celebrate in his favorite place, classroom with students. So congratulations to all.
Thank you, Dan. Susan Fox?
I just want to add, probably on, no, I'm not on mute, good. That in honor of Public School Week, which is this week, I want to just extend recognition and thanks to all of our staff for everything they do every day. Recognizing the importance of public schools. There's been just so much stress lately and just with the pandemic, but some of the legislative action. I think I just want everybody to know how much we all appreciate them.
Thank you, Susan. Right. Are there any correspondence and announcements?
Okay, none.
All right. Next are administrative reports, and we'll begin with the principal report. Reed Foster, Granite Ridge School.
Well, good evening, everyone. Happy last week in February, and thanks for giving us this opportunity to share what we're doing here at Granite Ridge School. And we're going to tonight show you how we are working with our non-negotiables that our district just recently put into policy earlier this school year. We started this journey 7 years ago with our non-negotiables. They were aspirational at that time and they turned intentional. And now with policy, we know they're super important to the work we do. So our whole presentation tonight is geared around that thereof, how we're implementing work with our non-negotiables, utilizing this great space we have at Granite Ridge. So again, thank you for supporting this school building. And tonight we have a nice team with us. We have Brooke Goldsworthy, she's a 5th grade teacher here at Granite Ridge. Tiffany Haas, 4th grade teacher. John Hagan, our school TOSA. Matt Hayden, the district math coach, is our ICS for Equity district liaison. Bridget Lawler, 3rd grade teacher. Lauren Lennon, our school psychologist. Melissa Mogg, our advanced learners teacher for Cottage Grove, and us here at Granite Ridge. And finally, Charlotte Miller, our art teacher here at Granite Ridge. Next, I'm going to turn it over to John Hagan.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me, and I'm going to be navigating the slides at the same time. So if you need to give me a little heads up or anything that's not working correctly, I'll do my best to keep up with all the speakers tonight. So typically what we do at all of our professional developments or anytime we get together as a staff is really focus in on what the purpose is of that meeting. And we use, just like with our students, a learning target. It really promotes clarity among what we really want to get out of our time together. It offers us an opportunity to kind of circle back at the end to check in. How did we do with our learning target and setting that purpose? And did we meet the goals that we set for ourselves? So just like in all the things that we do with our students, we try to model that with our staff as well. So this evening, you'll notice the learning target is today that we will have a better understanding of how Granite Ridge School intentionally embeds the work of our MGSD's non-negotiables into our daily practices. So that's really what we're going to focus in on today. And so we'll circle back to that a little later. So keep that in mind. The next slide just gives us an overview of our, as you are well aware, the Monona Grove non-negotiables that we are tied very tightly to. It's a really important component to our work because it helps us streamline everything that we do in terms of professional development, how we talk about kids, the different spaces that we use. And as you all know, it's been that 7-year journey of brainstorming some of these ideas, making them really aspirational. We weren't all the way there, nor are we yet today. However, a lot of the choices that we're making and the conversations that we're having are moving that towards being more intentional about these non-negotiables. And now, as our equity statement and our non-negotiables have become part of policy, we're even continuing to move even further along that continuum to make sure that our work is really highlighted and that we're holding tightly to these 7 different principles. Oftentimes at different professional developments, we try to highlight several of them that are really, really closely tied to. For example, oftentimes We'll tie to number 3, making sure that we are engaging in that high quality core instruction within those heterogeneous groups. But for tonight's purposes, we're going to highlight them all for you. So sit back and get ready for seeing some of the amazing things that happen at Granite Ridge School. And so I'm going to hand it over to Brooke Goldsworthy to talk about our first non-negotiable.
All right, so non-negotiable 1, stating that each MGSD employee shares responsibility for the prevention of student failure. The photo on this slide is a picture of 2 classrooms. The door is opened up between so that all the students can engage in the same learning. And this is an example of a whole group lesson for both classes at the same time. It allows us the opportunity to have support by multiple people depending on the day. So depending on which day it is, you could see 2 different general education teachers, a special education teacher, an SEA, a reading specialist, and or English language support. So there's lots of different people that can come in and out throughout this time to help support these groups of students. All the staff members that come in during this time share the responsibility for all students. So they work with multiple different groups depending on the day, and those groups rotate by the day or by the week, depending on kind of what unit we're in. On the next slide, there is a short video where we're going to hear from some students about the reading stations time that they have.
I'm Ellie. I'm Morella. And I'm Demi.
And today we're going to share about some reading rotations that we have done. Demi, can you tell me about our reading rotations?
Yes, we usually do like book club reading or Words Their Way or Choice Board or I'm Ready.
Ellie, what adults have you gotten to work with for reading stations?
Miss Goldsworthy, Miss Powell, Miss Verhagen, and Miss Doman.
And Morella, what's your favorite part about reading stations?
My favorite part is either the menu or book clubs.
What I like about reading stations is now, like, when we did book groups, we could just take turns on reading, and now we can choose what we do for reading, so I like that.
And what adults have you gotten to work with during reading stations?
Miss Goldsworthy, Miss Powell, and Miss Doman.
Hadley, what about you?
My favorite part was book clubs because, like, the books that we got to read were what we wanted to read, like, we got to choose. And just getting to talk to, like, one another about the books. And that was my favorite.
And who have you gotten to work with?
I've got to work with Miss Verhagen, Miss Doman, and Miss Goldsworthy.
So as you can see, these students kind of highlighted some of the different activities that can be done during this time. And keeping the activities open and flexible allows a lot of support to come in and out and be flexible in how we use that. And as you could also see, each of these students got to work with multiple different adults during this time. And it changes depending on what unit we're in. So all of the adults that do come in and out share in the responsibility and the success of these students. And we enjoy working with them on a regular basis. So continuing on with non-negotiable number 1, you will now hear from Reed again.
Okay, now I'm going to give you an example here of our servery near our flex cafes. And so when that non-negotiable says all, we believe in the value of all of our staff members. And right here's an example of how our food service with our design, having a food service person at each one of our flex cafes or serveries gives that person a chance to work with students on that one-on-one, get to know their names, get to build a relationship. Do they like ranch sauce? Do they like ketchup? All those kind of things. It's a really another neat example of how we're using the space, but also all employees sharing the stake of making sure that our students get the best educational experience. You can also see in this picture, classroom teachers there at that servery helping students check out as they get their food. And they'll continue on into the Flex Cafe because there they'll see our educational assistants to do that supervision. And that's a great way for them to connect. Maybe check in about a student that's not doing so well today, maybe sad, maybe there's a way that they could help lift that spirit up. Maybe keep an eye on something that's maybe been happening in the classroom, but there's that connector again, all staff that's there for our students. Then after recess, the way the building is designed, that educational assistant that comes in with a grade level, they can come back into that grade level habitat and connect with teachers and just give them some updates on how maybe recess or how lunch went. So there's a continuation all day long of all the employees having a responsibility here at Granite Ridge School. All right, next up, I think I'm sliding this over to Matt Hayden.
You're sliding it to me. So here we have a picture of a third grade co-planning team, and this team is made up of a few third grade teachers, a special education teacher, the district math coach, and an advanced learner support teacher. And the team is working together for all students. And the TV in this working space allows us to all view the same resource that we might be discussing. And each teacher brings something unique and different to the table to help create lessons that are accessible to all. So Mr. Foster is now going to discuss and start non-negotiable number 2.
Okay, for non-negotiable number 2, you all are aware, but this is regarding principles of natural proportions will be used to support the mirror demographics of students in all educational settings. So here's an example of 2 different classrooms here at Granite Ridge School. And what we're talking about and what we mean by that is we have this, we started a new way of doing our placement. And so basically with our placement, we allows the demographics to mirror what we see is in the larger school. In this way, we eliminate that idea of a deficit-based thinking or stereotype threat related to that's a special education room or that's an EL classroom. We work hard to mirror the demographics of varied abilities as well. So no longer are there academic homogeneous groupings in classrooms for the same reasons previously mentioned. This allows us to look at each classroom as a group of students with a range of needs, regardless of labels. It gives a better individualized understanding of students rather than focusing on their gaps in learning or abilities. Now I'm going to actually move it over to Matt for non-negotiable number 3.
Reed called me Math. I'm the math coach, but my name is Matt. That's a common occurrence, I guess, that happens across the district. But non-negotiable number 3, all learners will participate in high quality core instruction within heterogeneous groups. So here we have images of students working together on a math project, a challenging math project. And we can see the furniture and the setup of the school really fosters that collaborative nature. But this heterogeneous grouping is both with the classroom, but within the classes themselves. And what you can't see that happens across the school is all of the other things that are kind of listed here in these bullet points. So teachers and staff are continually working to offer opportunities for students to work collaboratively together. And they're working to build classroom communities across academic content area, SEL, and those things. Within that, they're fostering these student to teacher relationships and these student to student relationships so that when they are working collaboratively, they have the best chance of success. Another thing that you can't really see is high expectations. The expectation is that all students are engaged with this grade level activity, this grade level learning. And that requires some of the things that we saw a little bit ago about these groups of people working together to create these UDL lessons, these lessons that are designed from the get-go for a range of learners and that have multiple entry points. And not just entry points as far as academics, but entry points that go beyond academics, such as interests and engagement. So I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Haas, 4th grade teacher.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Haas, 4th grade, and I'm going to continue discussing how Granite Ridge students are participating in the high quality instruction within heterogeneous groupings. So on this slide, you're going to see students who are meeting with their peers and a teacher during their reading block at a common space in the room. And sometimes this takes place at, the table, but sometimes it might take place in their desks or out in our habitats or in the small group rooms, the social stairs, the library, anywhere where students are able to work. And then these fourth grade students in particular are meeting with their book groups, and students were able to choose their chapter book based solely on their interests and not on any sort of reading level or assessments. So before these book clubs even started, the teachers thoughtfully chose several books from our library book room to meet this interest. And then once the teacher chose those 3 books, she read a little bit of each one to the kids, or she found a book trailer for the students to watch, just to give them an idea of what the book might be like, to kind of to gauge their interest so they could choose what would be best for them. So after they got a little intro to each book, the students told their teacher which book they'd like to be a part of. So there was no grouping by ability or reading level, and there was no limit to how many students could be in each group. So students were placed entirely off of their interest, and they got to say what would engage them the most in their next several months of reading. So giving students that choice was extremely empowering and motivating. And then if a student chooses a book that was too difficult for them to read on their own, then all the teachers are making sure that students are still able to access the text by either reading with a partner, or they were listening to a recording of the book that their teacher has set up for them. So that way it allows all students to be able to meet with their book clubs already ready to go and discuss and dig deeper into the book. And then if I can go to the next one. All right, and then continuing on with another example of how students are receiving that high quality core instruction with heterogeneous groupings. You're going to notice on this slide that we have students performing on our beautiful social stairs, and they're performing a reader's theater that they have been practicing for an entire week. Students were once again able to choose a script that they wanted to perform based on what their interest was. So the teachers found several different options, placed them all out, kind of gave them a little background on what each one would be about, and students chose based solely off of what they thought would be most fun to learn and perform. And then while participating in the Reader's Theater, not only were all students engaged, but they were already asking us, when can we do this again? Could we do it once a month? Could we do it once a week? Can we start a club for kids who like to perform? And what was so interesting was kids who are the shyest in class were shining in this, because this finally gave them an outlet of something that they maybe don't always get to show in class. So, we had kids that said, can I have the main character part? Can I have the main narrator part that you would never guess, because they were so excited because they had a choice in their education and their say. So up next, you're going to be hearing from Charlotte Miller, our talented art teacher and related arts representative for tonight.
Thank you, Tiffany. So continuing on with this non-negotiable and the heterogeneous grouping and choice, this slide shows photos of students in an art class where they were given the opportunity to choose an artwork, a famous artwork that interests them. Images are up all over the classroom. They could choose the one that they wanted to talk about and learn more about, and then they could get up and talk about that. And at first I wasn't sure how this was going to work, how many students would want to get up and talk about artwork that they just based solely on what they saw in the work. They were to tell the different details that they saw. They were to tell how it made them feel. They were to tell how what they thought that the artist was trying to say through this artwork. And also the last thing that they were to comment on was, if they were the artist, what would they title this artwork? And I was just blown away by all the students that volunteered to stand up with their small group that they formed themselves based on the choice that they made with this artwork. So it was really neat to see some different groupings come forward and to hear those voices talking about artwork and being excited about it too. All right, next slide, John. So our next focus will be on non-negotiable number 4. So I will focus on the related arts for my slides in this non-negotiable. When each of our students enter the related art spaces at Granite Ridge School, they are met with many opportunities to be engaged, to express themselves, and to feel represented. So here first we have a video that Ms. Freilich took in her art room that shows the different options for choice of seating, student suggestion zone, creating quiet zone if needed, offering diverse supplemental materials, and a safe space. Our related arts teachers work very hard to integrate cultural appreciation into our lessons. As you can see here, we have two photographs. We work very closely with our special ed teachers and assistants to help us best differentiate our lessons to meet the needs for all students. In the top photo, you can see a student who has visual impairment working with his special ed assistant. Materials have been set out in an accessible and intuitive way for each learner to create. The second photo shows the makerspace, where students are working on a stop motion video for library class. Students of all abilities were able to utilize the variety of materials available to fit their vision for the project. And then here, there is a video and a photograph. It's showing a fourth grader who's able to use a ramp to help him get a strike during the bowling unit in Fayette. This student prefers sitting to standing, so being able to sit on the mat and roll the ball down the ramp made the activity accessible to him. So this is one example of how activities are differentiated in Fayette at Granite Ridge so that all students can engage and be successful. And there's a video to show you too. Ready? Start. Here, go! Okay, Lauren Lennon, our school psychologist, will present the next slide.
All right, so continuing to think about our work within Non-Negotiable 4, here are some examples of how staff at Granite Ridge are using the physical design of our grade level habitats to allow for students to have choice and autonomy in where their learning occurs, and also to foster collaboration and community. And these spaces really help build students' independence, allow them to take ownership over their learning. So in this first picture, you can see a group of fourth grade students who are collaborating on their Readers Theater project. And these students are set up in what we call a cove, or it's a common workspace between two classrooms that allows them to really focus in on their group work with minimized distractions. And then you can also see within this picture how some of the furniture really fosters that collaboration. So they're spread out with their materials around a large table, or they could choose to use one of the mobile desks and chairs to engage in their Readers Theater work together. And then the second picture shows third grade students who are engaging in independent reading time, and they were given options for different optimal reading spots. And these students chose a comfy couch spot outside of their classroom to work. Then, next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about our social emotional work So social emotional learning is happening universally in our building, and the curriculum is organized and coordinated by our awesome school counselor and taught by our classroom teachers. And each month we dig into a different character trait. So for example, this month is empathy, last month was kindness. And the goal of this approach is to provide all students with the opportunity to learn about and practice different social emotional skills through direct instruction and modeling from staff, and then give students the opportunity to practice, reflect, and engage with their classmates on some of that skill development. And you can see just a snippet of that in a picture to the far left with one of our third grade teachers engaging in a lesson with her class. And then students are also given the option to use tools throughout our building aimed at facilitating their use of personal coping skills and strategies. So for example, all classrooms have been provided calm down baskets for students to use when they need it. And then in these other two pictures, you'll see a sensory wall that has been put in place within each grade level habitat. Here, a fifth grader is using one of the breathing strategies. And then that last picture is just a snippet into what is in the works of being a fourth grade student lounge. This was a totally student-led project, and they've advocated to Mr. Foster about the need for this space in one of our empty classrooms, came up with a blueprint for what's going to be provided within this student lounge and expectations for the space, and are really working to create an area that promotes SEL for all students in that habitat, which I think is a really great example of students taking ownership over their learning and their learning space. So next you will hear from Melissa Mock.
Hi, I'm going to talk about non-negotiable 5, and a theme that you've seen before is going to come up again. And that non-negotiable is that educators with a range of expertise are intentionally aligned to create teams that increase each other's capacity through a co-planning and co-serving model in support of all learners. And at Granite Ridge School, we intentionally group staff members with varying expertise at all edges to work with classroom teachers during their planning time. And during this planning time, we look specifically at ways that we can support, that we can scaffold, that we can challenge all students so that they can engage with that grade level curriculum. And our goal is so that we can build capacity among all staff to do this at all time. And as you can see, the physical space at Granite Ridge School makes meeting with different teams of educators possible. There's access to technology, large tables that we can spread out at. And also with the variety of spaces, each grade level can choose a meeting space that works for them. So sometimes we meet in flex cafes, sometimes we meet in classrooms. And so the physical space allows us to really dig into that co-planning time. Next up, you're going to hear again from Reed.
Thanks, Melissa. That last non-negotiable uses the word intentional. I think there's also this opportunity in this building for impromptu. The design you see here is in the library. It's 4 teachers, different grade levels meeting around a spot together. Again, having great ability to collaborate and talk with one another. You've been in the building and you know that our one wing is all of our related arts classes. And so with that, sometimes you'll walk out there and as if in between a related arts class, you'll see all of the related arts teachers out there talking to one another and maybe collaborating over one of their events coming up, maybe a lesson that they've worked together on creating. And then also, like Melissa said, our flex cafes, because they're only used for an 11 o'clock and a 12 o'clock lunch, oftentimes not only are teachers using that for the co-planning idea, but there's small groups of students that use that space for their level of collaboration, because we know how beneficial that is to their education as well. And now I'm going to pass it on to John.
All right, Reed stealing some of my good lines here, I tell you. as we talk a little bit about the intentionality and the spaces that we use of bringing staff together to meet the needs of students, this is what makes me really excited is this photo right here. The Flex Cafe, one of the principles behind that was to not occupy a large amount of space with not a lot of use. So this Flex Cafe allows for more relationships, I think, to be built, especially in terms of lunchtime, indoor recess space. It's a more intimate space where kids can build those relationships, have conversations with peers and adults. But it also gives them ownership over the space as well, because it's within their grade level. And so they have a sense of pride within that. And I've seen personally firsthand how they take a little bit better care of it rather than if it was just a large open cafeteria that was used by the entire school. What's really great about this photo is you're seeing 3 different classrooms get together to do a collaborative math activity. They're working on division. And what you'll notice is there's classroom teachers here, there's special education assistants. The principal was actually in the room. Myself as the TOSA was there to support. And we even had our lunchroom supervisors helping out and really offering their expertise as well. So it was such an amazing group effort. You'll see kids have manipulatives out working on division. Some might be drawing pictures using a whiteboard or crayons or markers. But the exciting part, the most exciting part, is they're all working on those 4th grade standards regardless of their abilities. So in this picture alone, I can identify students receiving special education services, students that are receiving English language learning opportunities. There's students that may not be identified as super strong in math, but look at the collaboration happening, and everyone has that opportunity to be successful. And that's really what a lot of these spaces, especially this Flex Cafe, is showcasing for us. And then I think it's my turn to wrap it up as well. So as you know, we started at the beginning with our learning target and with all of our professional development. And anytime that we meet as a staff, whether it's a bigger group or not, we always circle back to that learning target. So that learning target today, we will have a better understanding of how Granite Ridge School intentionally embeds our work with our MGSD non-negotiables into our daily practices. Typically, we'd ask you to fill out an exit slip or maybe give some thumbs up, but we'll let you slide on that one tonight. It's getting a little late, so we just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for allowing us to showcase this work. We're just so excited to show how our building and our work as a staff is aligning to our non-negotiables and how we're really making this intentional and purposeful, and how throughout the years, we're continuing to move further along on that continuum, like I said earlier, and just deepening our work to make the best possible outcomes for every single student that comes through our doors and help us set a solid foundation throughout the district K-12. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, Reed Foster will be fielding those.
Peter?
My first comment is, John, how come thumbs down isn't an option? He said, first of all, I have nothing but 2 big thumbs up. And what I'm most pleased to see actually is your first non-negotiable acknowledges that we can fail students. That's not a trivial thing to say, but it is the first step. Is the first and an essential step to improving how we serve students. I'm very pleased to see the integration of new, and I'll call them technologies, teaching technologies, and the way we're serving students. And I want to note that this is not. This has been observed. I've gotten feedback from students and parents that they appreciate, particularly as we come out of the pandemic. people are talking about this, that they're seeing a difference in the way that we're educating, in the technology essentially with which we educate students, was by acknowledging and not playing to, but educating to different styles, what we have learned, and adopting that to improve what we're doing in education. So the work that you're doing here has not gone unnoticed. It's not gone unnoticed in students and parents and administrators or this board. So I want to say that we appreciate it and want to give you two big thumbs up for that. At the same time, a teacher should not be standing on a chair if you guys need resources, which was in the last photo. If you guys need resources so that somebody can be raised up and stand up, well, come to us. We need to figure that out so we don't have accidents waiting to happen. If that's what you need to do, heck, we'll figure that out. So there's a way that a teacher can do that without standing on a chair.
Okay, Elizabeth.
That was really funny, Peter. I mean, you all had me at like, we're going to talk about how we operationalize this policy. So, I mean, major kudos there. I think, when I think about our, equity non-negotiables, being turned into policy, and I have the great privilege of sitting on our policy committee with Susan Manning and Susan Fox. A lot of the discussion we had, right, is around the languaging aspects of the non-negotiable, right? They're wordy, they're kind of wonky, right? And it's really nice to see how those really live and breathe in a real setting. And so I really appreciated how you broke that down and how you gave those explicit examples. And I think it just reinforces, to me anyway, I'll let my other committee members speak for themselves, but what exactly, we wanted to see happen when we moved those into policy. So thanks for that. And I really appreciate how much you highlighted student voice and choice. I know that over the last several board meetings, for those of you who are followers of the board meetings, we've been talking a lot about mental health and trauma-informed practices, and how I want to cannot underscore enough or highlight enough how much student voice and choice is critically important as a trauma-informed practice, as instructional engagement practice, as just good teaching and learning. And then the concept of high expectations and high supports, which was just, I think you didn't say it explicitly, but it was embedded throughout everything that you talked about, right? This idea that we set the bar here and we will help you meet it with whatever you need. It is, again, a huge trauma-informed value. It's a huge equity issue. And so I really appreciated it. And I loved all the videos and hearing from the students directly. So thanks a lot for all of your work. It was really great. And I'm glad the new building's working so well for you all. It looks like you can do some pretty neat stuff.
Thank you. Susan Manning?
I totally echo the thoughts of the other board members, and so many thanks for all that you've done. Takes me back to one of my first days as an early board member. There was a teacher who invited me to come to their class and watch. And I was so incredibly impressed with the things that they were doing with the students in the integration of their thoughts and philosophies, and identifying each student and their needs and meeting those. And actually that was Reed Foster. And to see that again in this way was so incredible. I can't thank each and every one of you so it's hard to sleep at night as a board member. And to watch this presentation brings so much, at least to me, in terms of what I want to do and how I want to support you. It was absolutely an incredible presentation. And the integration and identification of each and every student in the presentation was incredible. Great staff. Thank you.
Susan Fox?
I don't really have anything to add other than to just reiterate that I so much appreciate the presentation, because, we talk about all these ideas and they seem lofty and they seem aspirational a lot of times. And it's just been so nice to hear, and with some of the previous presentations too, but hear for you directly to take the equity, the non-negotiables, for example, and just show how you're really working with them. And it's just, it's wonderful to see. And earlier when I thanked all the staff for what they're doing, it's this kind of thing that I just wish the general public could see and have a better understanding of just all of the serious work and thought and collaboration that you guys put in every day. It's really, really nice presentation about it as well. Thank you.
Right. No other comments from board members. I just want to echo everything that my fellow board members are saying. This was a phenomenal presentation, and it really shows that you have a lot of student involvement and innovation as well. And you definitely think out of the box. So we appreciate all that you do, and thank you for your presentation again, to the Granite Ridge staff. All right.
Before we let him go, if I could just make one quick comment, and Mr. Foster, I think you need to share with the board that photo of the group together in the Flex Cafe. Talk a little bit about how that group came together and why we had 3 classes in that space at one time, and it was a little bit impromptu, but you can see how everyone just jumped in together. So you want to tell a little bit about the background of that?
Sure. So first of all, to Peter's comment, I actually asked for the picture to make a little adjustment and do some photoshopping so she was staying on the ground. But anyhow, I didn't get my way on that. But you all know about our sub situation that we've been dealing with this year. And so in the middle of the day, actually about 15 minutes before this happened, a teacher in the building became ill. And then another person became ill. It was like bang, bang. And all of a sudden we had 3 classrooms in 4th grade. And one of the 4th grade teachers, Ms. Freeberg, came out. She's like, hey, I can take them all. I just need a few other people to support and help out. We'll just take them all down to the Flex Cafe. We're all doing the same work in division, but we know we can do this together. And so next thing you know, we're walking kind of down the collaboration space, and a couple of the lunch or the EA, they're like, hey, we can help. And it's actually past the time they normally would stay. And so all of a sudden they jump in. And then we've got a few radios. So I called on the radio, and next thing you know, a few people came up from the office, and yeah, so it was just one of those things. And when you think about subs, the sub situation, the biggest priority for us during that whole time is to really guarantee solid education for our students and making sure that they didn't miss a beat. And that doesn't, that's from my perspective, having to fill all those gaps. But when a teacher takes on that responsibility and thinks like, hey, we can do this, that sends a charge through everybody in that whole grade level that we can do things a little differently, and using the space, but also using each other to lean on. So that's what happened that day. And then we actually talked about like, how do we make this happen more? How do we bring groups together in that kind of a form? Because we did see the value in the range of learners that were all together in that classroom or that Flex Cafe, and what that benefit could be. So thanks, Dan, for remembering that.
Thank you, Reed. All right, we can go ahead and move on to the superintendent report. Thank you again to the Granite Ridge staff as well.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, so I'll keep mine very short tonight. There's just one topic that I have on my report I wanted to share out with you. I shared a link to the annual report from Dane County School Consortium, and that's a consortium of all the Dane County schools, and actually a couple that are outside of Dane County that we are part of our group as well. And it's primarily our youth apprenticeship program, our other school to work programs. And so I won't go through the slides. Josh Fassel, you might remember, is our executive director for the consortium. He presented this report to our Dane County Superintendent group last week. So I just wanted to share it out with you. And I think a lot of the slides are fairly self-explanatory. When you get towards the end, there's one that has the data and shows the number of participants by school district. And you'll see in the youth apprenticeship program, for example, we have the second most number of students of any other school in the county, and that's a credit, obviously to not only Josh's leadership, but our leadership of our staff at the high school, and provided those opportunities, for our kids. One of the other thing that's not on all of those slides that we have some more detailed information that Josh shares with us, partly because of cell size and a little bit of confidentiality as far as some of that. But we're also tracking, again, our student participation, based on our different various, student demographics, our students of low socioeconomic status. We're tracking participation by our number of students of color. And the data for the last 3 years has been encouraging, particularly for our school district. And so this is something that if there's an interest, we'd be glad to give a more detailed report at some point and perhaps bring our team. And I know Josh would love to meet as well. But there's just so many things that we have that are happening. This is another example of a real positive opportunity. So I said, I just wanted to share this report with you. And we can certainly, I can answer any questions now, but also be glad to take an opportunity in the future to dig in a little bit deeper on some of these items that you might have an interest in.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I would love a kind of a deeper and more formal presentation on this. There's a lot of really interesting and cool stuff in this report. So yeah, I'd really welcome that opportunity.
All right, there are no further questions. Okay. We can move on to board reports, or do you have anything else, Dan, to share?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Board reports, starting with Policy Committee, Susan Manning.
We did not meet today, and we are planning a meeting in March, and we're basically going to take on the same agenda that was planned for today. And actually, this gives us a little more time to do, we've actually researched the sustainability significantly, but there are so many articles to read. I found 3 more that were just excellent. Green schools in Colorado. And we looked at other states. First, we tried to stay in Dan County and then in Wisconsin. But again, there's so many amazing things. And the statements that they use, it could be integrated into a policy, are really good. So this is really going to be beneficial, I think, to us as a committee. So I'll report out at the next meeting.
Thank you, Susan. All right, next is the Ad Hoc Sustainability Committee. Peter?
Hi, we met last Thursday. Sort of the news, we do sort of nail down a date for an open house / ribbon cutting for the solar project of Saturday, May 21st. So mark your calendars. We're working on having an event at the high school to open to the community, to introduce the project and what we're doing for the project. So that's May 21st at 10 in the morning, hopefully, if all goes well. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. All right, next are possible action items. First is the policy revisions, second reading.
I would just state that we have received no input or written comments between the first and second reading. So I would make a motion for approval of the policies as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Clarine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of approximately 4,745,000 general obligation refunding bonds, series 2022.
Okay, unmute. Anyway, so as I had mentioned in the agenda before, the district had another opportunity to take advantage of the low interest rates market that's happening. But what we are starting to see is those interest rates start to climb. We did not get as good a deal as we thought we were going to today. It was still a good deal. So we had 6 bidders. We ended up getting a final lock-in interest rate of 1.94%, which is lower than the current rates that range from a 2.75 to a 3.3 in the previous locked-in amounts that we had. So this did result in over $300,000 worth of savings for the district, or I should say our taxpayers, because these are bonds. So it's not money that's going into our general fund, but definitely is passed along to our taxpayers in the levy when we set it on an annual basis. And these bonds were originally to be paid off in the year 2034. In addition to the $300,000 in savings, we were able to shave off a year of payments. So now they will mature in 2033. So overall, it was good. We were anticipating closer to a 1.5% interest rate, and that's why we had originally stated that we were looking for approximately 4.745. But I did update it. The final borrowing amount would be that $4,590,000. So that's what would be in the recommended motion. Any questions?
Peter?
Not 0.4%. Last year, I want to point out to my colleagues, last year when we did this refunding, refinancing, we got 0.4%. Unfortunately, interest rates, state law prevents us from, state law was changed recently, and it prevented us from refinancing more of our debt, which would have saved the taxpayers a lot of money. And I'm sure, Jared, that this is the maximum you can refinance this year.
This is it. This is our last amount for a while, actually. We don't have any more callable bonds that come up for a number of years.
Unfortunately, the state law limits us. Not unlike your home mortgage, you can't refinance if you find a lower rate that makes sense. So districts are prohibited from doing that, except when bonds are callable, or called essentially. And unfortunately, it's a missed opportunity to save the taxpayers substantial dollars. But thanks, Jared.
No problem.
You're doing what you can.
That's right.
All right, Susan Fox. Hope you're on mute.
Well, then I would make a motion for approval.
Actually, that's what I was just doing. I move approval of the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of 4,590,000 general obligation refunding bond series 2022 as presented.
A second.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning.
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Susan Fox.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Lorraine. Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is the Middleton Cross Plains area and Monona Grove School District's cooperative contract, safety and security services, Wisconsin Statute 66.0301.
Okay, I'll kick it off, and then this is something Jared and I have been working together on with Middleton Cross Plains. And so I think what we tried to write there in the executive summary is something we've talked about a lot, right? That we know that with our school safety plans, we've got things that we have to have in place. We have safety plans that have to be filed with the Department of Justice. And what we've talked about, one of our challenges is coordinating all this together, not only the procedures, but, as talk about, crisis response and then ongoing, review of those and how we pull that all together and look at, the education part of it as well with our students and our staff. And so this is a great opportunity for us to have some outside expertise to work and really facilitate the process with our staff. It'll be our staff continuing to do the bulk of the work, but we have an opportunity to partner with Middleton Cross Plains for basically a half-time position to work with us to go through and really pull this together. You know, we're in compliance with state law and federal law, but as you know, like everything else, this last 2 years with the pandemic, you know, it's been hard to keep up as much as we should have, perhaps, with, you know, some of these issues. And so I think the timing of this is right, and you know, we need some extra help to pull that together. And at this point, it's just a 1-year commitment, and so I'll pause there. And I don't know if Jared, if there's anything to add to that. All the details of the contract and so on, Jared, you know, pulled together for us.
You know, I think Dan summed it up pretty well. I think the biggest part of it is that having someone that can be committed to focusing on the safety and security. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that there's definitely multiple different facets of safety and security. There's the facility side, the mechanisms, and then there's also the student and staff well-being side of things. And so this individual actually came up through the classroom side of things, so they understand the importance of combining it all together. And when you look at planning for safety, it takes in the facility side of things, but it also takes in student services. It takes in CNI. I mean, a lot of different people that come together. And so, I mean, ideally, every school district should be able to fund a 1.0, but we know the way that funding is for school districts, that's not the case. And so in a competitive market, this is the best opportunity that we have, is to have someone that can be fully committed to it, and we're shared those duties between. As Dan said, that doesn't mean that the duties leave our district, because obviously we know that if there's a safety event that's going to happen, it's probably going to happen on the day that safety person is not in the building and they're across town. So there's still that capacity that needs to continue to be built internally to ensure that we're having the support, the mechanism, but making sure that we're also meeting the law, Act 143, and meeting that, but then also making sure that we're developing those tabletop exercises, having the ability to talk through best practices with our staff and our administration, and making sure that our students are feeling supported during this.
Peter?
This is a proposal to hire a director of safety and security, correct? At a salary of $138,000 plus benefits, correct? Of which Monona Grove is paying half.
That is correct. Yep.
And who is right now fulfilling the duties of, you know, safety and security for the district right now?
There's approximately 4 or 5 individuals filling in, and it's not being done to the fullest that it should be done.
Oh, who are those 4 or 5 individuals? Or
you pretty much have Jeff Carr, who is our facility and safety supervisor, who oversees all the buildings and grounds and facilities. You have myself. We have our 2 SRO officers. We have Krista Foster, and then obviously Dan is involved as well, and Katie with the communication side.
so are the duties and responsibilities of those people going to be taken? Are they going to be shifted to this half-time administrator?
They're the planning side of things, and then trading side of things will be shifted to this individual, but the day-to-day operations of ensuring drills that are being done will have to maintain internally, along with the day-to-day or the communication in case there is events would obviously have to fall internally as well. As I mentioned, that the most likely if there was a safety event, that safety person probably is not going to be in the building because it's shared. And that's why this is only a 1-year commitment at this time. The goal of it is that we can build capacity and get things set up in a system that can be withheld within the school districts. But right now there's just so much that has to be done. Not that we're not prepared for something to happen. There just needs to be a lot more systems put in place to ensure that we're meeting the needs of everybody, from our staff to our students to our community. We're bringing out a new building. How does that work with communications? Looking at the way that we communicate with our families when it comes time to do training. How do we pull our SRO officers? So there's a lot of different things that we're getting it done, but it's not being done at the fullest extent that it could be, where we could be extremely a leader in the states when it comes to school safety.
How many students does Middleton Cross Plains have and how many buildings?
They are approximately twice the size that we are for student wise, and they have, I think, 13 buildings.
Because I noticed that this is a 50, that this terms of the salary is 50-50.
That is correct. Not to compare the both school districts, but I would tell you that they probably have more systems in place because this individual has been devoted to that pretty much very consistently over the last 2 years. And so by us being 50%, it's going to bring us up to where we believe we need to be at.
Does this individual, this person already works for Middleton Cross Plains? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what's going on?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm a little bit concerned about adding an administrative position to the district without more consideration. You know, I haven't seen this before. Did I miss something?
I don't believe so, Dan.
I'm not sure you mean by not having heard about this before tonight. I'm quite certain that it was brought up in a previous board meeting. But the reality is, I mean, this is a purchase service. It's not, the person would be an employee of Middleton Cross Plains School District. And so, as Jared said, it's really the idea, this is not a permanent thing. We're looking for support to help facilitate us, to give us the capacity. We have a lot of things, and I don't see us being to the point that we're going to have a person that's dedicated to safety and security. It's going to have to be a shared amongst, more than one individual. But right now, we don't have things, we need, that's one of the things we have to determine moving forward about who does need to be in charge. They said we have several individuals that all have kind of a piece of it right now. And that needs to change. We mentioned the 2 SROs have been a big part. They should be, they should have a very limited role, moving forward. They, definitely serve a role, but we just have relied on whomever has been available. And so that's really the idea behind this. So this is not a permanent thing. It's really, to start with what is just a 1-year commitment. And that's the hope that we can then build our own capacity moving forward.
Where does the $88,000 come from?
I'll let Jared answer that one.
So it's pretty much part of our zero-based budgeting. Obviously, it becomes a priority if this is what's approved by the board as well. With enrollment growth, we're just in the process of putting our budget together. So it comes out of general fund. It's not out of Fund 80 or anything like that. It's specifically out of general funds. And will just become part of our request process with the zero-based budgeting. And I mean, something else might not be approved if we don't get the number of students or open enrollment. The other part is we can definitely look at ESSER funds to also help fund this as a one-time position as well.
I would just note momentarily that the number one threat of safety and security to our students is the risk of suicide. And that we're not looking at spending $88,500 to reduce that risk at this moment.
I think you'll see.
And I think that would
staffing plan.
What's
shortly.
that?
I think you'll see that in a staffing plan shortly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Elizabeth?
In general, I think that this is a good idea. I think and not just in regards to this position, but as we look at positions that are necessary, but either difficult to fill or we don't have a justification for a full FTE, I think solutions around how do we partner with neighboring districts just make a lot of sense, right? And so to me, it's an interesting thing to try. It feels different and innovative, and I appreciate that aspect of it. The question that I have is actually in regards to the essential job functions and the position summary. So like, as you state, Jared, school safety, and as we've talked about here, right, school safety is big and more than just like the physical safety. And I think how Department of Justice would describe safety, right, threat assessments and those kinds of things. And I think Peter's point around suicide is an interesting one, in that are we missing an opportunity here to have a part-time director of safety and security whose job description is so narrowly focused and essential duties are so narrowly focused on like actual physical threats of violence and active shooter and those types of things, when we could really use this person to do what we were talking about several board meetings ago, which is to look at safety holistically so that we can make a coordinated and comprehensive safety plan that's inclusive of some of these things that come with the DOJ and the other statutory requirements there, but are also inclusive of the things that we know actually increase, student health and well-being, and mental and emotional safety. So that's I guess my question for you, Dan, is like, where's that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I go back and look, it's maybe not as explicit as it could be in the actual position description, but that absolutely is a key part. That was my very first conversation with the superintendent at Middleton Cross Plains. We talked exactly about that. It's one thing to put together the physical plans, but the connection to our student services team and how that works together. This person would be a big part of just facilitating those groups. Our team will do the work, but to have them at the table and where do they fit in at the table and how this comes together. So maybe it's not as explicit as it could have been. I thought it was in there a little bit more than it was, but that's definitely a key component to what we'd like to see.
Is there a way to modify the agreement so it's explicit in there? It's my concern, right? Is that when you look at the job functions, I don't really see it at all. And I think that is a problem.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I don't think updating the agreement really is, I'm the one that's going to be responsible for the end result of the work here. And I guess all I can say is that absolutely is at the forefront of work that needs to happen here, and it will happen.
All right, I'll trust you, Dan. But no, I'm looking for it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Susan Manning?
Yes, I sincerely appreciate that Dan and Jared have brought this forward. These are our two critically important leaders who are assessing our school safety plan. And if you look at the Wisconsin Department of Justice webpage, Office of School Safety, it's very clear that there needs to be a school threat assessment protocol and comprehensive school security framework. And one of the things they just told us was that they have good people who are doing this right now, but the implication is that it may not be adequate. And that is not okay in this school system. And when Jared and Dan together come forward and say, we need this help, we need to do this, and the state effectively requires it to be done at a certain level, then this is where, as a board, we have to say, this is an administrative decision. They've done the assessment. They've come forward with us for this request, and Jared has studied how to budget this. Again, if there's an incident and we don't approve this, it's on us. I'm not going there. I'm totally in support of Dan and Jared bringing this forward to us in a manner that they think it can be budgeted and implemented. Not that it wouldn't be great to have our own school safety person, but this is like shared CISA services. They're trying to get the job done in the best possible way within a budget that we can afford. And I sincerely appreciate the work they've done and that they're bringing this forward. I seriously do, because this is not a safe time in schools unless we make it safe.
Peter?
By the same logic, if there's a suicide in our district, then it's on us too. And to be honest, it is. Okay. Now let's look at the real risk. See, here's the problem. The focus on physical safety. The research shows that the focus on physical safety increases the stress and anxiety among our children, and decreases as a result represents a risk to their mental health. We may inadvertently, in our hysteria about what are real threats, physical threats, be doing more harm than good. And we need to acknowledge that. And we need this. I'm not saying that this is a bad idea. I'm saying we have limited resources, and I would like to see our resources put where the real problems are. It's easy to say, oh, it's easy to be nervous about this. It's easy to be blamed for something if something happens. But things happen in our schools every day, and we need to put the focus and priority where the data shows is the place to put it.
Well, and Lorene, if I could just respond
moment.
to that. I understand that, but the mental health issue is exactly why we're having a board workshop on mental health, because we know those needs need to be met. And this board is committed to meeting those. So I don't want any implication that this isn't a major, huge commitment of this board right now, and has been, right, Dan, from me for the last 5 years.
Great. Where's the $88,500 to spend on it?
Okay, let's have protocol there. Raise your hands, please. I would like to hear from Krista, if you can just kind of weigh in on some of the things that are being said in regards to the suicides and so forth.
Yeah, I did come out. I just wanted to sort of reflect when Elizabeth was saying, and to Dan's point about what maybe could be more explicit, but is certainly embedded in the conversations we've had from the student services and the crisis response and communication lens, like totally in agreement, right? You prepare for the least likely scenarios, but you also prepare for what is happening. That's what student services, and from that end, that coordination piece is a big need that we all we'll continue to do our parts. We will do this as we can. I would just say that that's an emphasis that that from our lens is really necessary as well. And some of the things Jared talked about in terms of those sort of table talks or scenario conversations, we have been trying to get some of that up off the ground for a while. We've identified our gaps as well. So from each of our lens in terms of crisis and crisis response, I will just say, like, there's shared agreement that coordination piece is the next step, is the element that we would like to be able to take advantage of from sort of that, the on the ground practitioners who are meeting the needs of students and coming at this from mental health lens. They're asking for support and coordination as well. So from that broader perspective. So I think that's what I was just going to comment on more specifically around this particular position and the role, and our conversations around the systems approach to planning and preparing and for crisis response.
Thank you, Krista. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just want to say, Peter, you're not wrong. So Peter's not wrong in regards to how non-evidence-based school safety protocols and plans can affect students. Like, that is true. And also Susan's correct in that we have, regardless of whether that's accurate or not, we have statutory and grant requirements that make it so that we have to have particular things in place. And there's reasons for those too. And so I think, to me, at the end of the day, thinking about what you said, Krista, this isn't like an either or kind of thing. And I think we do ourselves as a board a disservice, and we do our district a disservice when we say it's either this or this. It has to be a both and. And I know we're going to get to the staffing plan later, which I perused earlier, right? But this idea of what does it mean to think about safety in a comprehensive way, which is inclusive of mental health, Peter, and you and I are squarely on the same page of that, but also inclusive of what we need to do to ensure that we have sort of, the security aspects, the threat assessment aspects, which, while I think are overemphasized in our system, they are there nonetheless, right? And so we can't just ignore them or decide that we're not going to deal with them. And so I think the idea of having this position as a person that can really move our systems in a way where we can fully articulate that spectrum, right? Fully articulate what all of our supports and services are and get everybody moving in the same direction so that we're all in the service of promoting safety for kids is a good idea. And so I think at the end of the day, like you're both right. And to put it in a binary to me is not useful and not accurate.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Peter or Susan, did you have any other further comments? Okay. Andrew?
I move approval of Middleton Cross Plains Area and Monona Grove School District Cooperative Contract, Safety and Security Services, Wisconsin Statute 66.0310 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Nay.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Lorene? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next is the final notice of non-renewal of teacher contract. You have a motion, please.
I'd make a motion for approval of the renewal of the is there a recommended motion there? I move approval of the final notice of non-renewal of teacher contract as presented. Sorry, my board docs is being slow.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Lorene? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is the revised regular board meeting schedule.
Okay, so we did have an opportunity for a workshop with the King County Consortium on March 9th. And so the attached schedule oops, okay. It looks like on my copy, the strike through didn't show up. So on the normal schedule is we have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, March 9th. So the revised schedule would change that regular meeting to Tuesday, March 8th.
May I please have a motion? Andrew?
I move approval of the revised regular board meeting schedule for 2021-2022 as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, move the roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Lorene? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is the summer school teaching pay.
Okay, so this is kind of a unique proposal, but we think a really important one. And let me start, and hopefully what was written in the executive summary is somewhat self-explanatory. But as we know that as summer school is always a really important thing for our students, but in particular, as we move out of this pandemic, we really think a robust summer school program is a really important thing for our students. And as you might guess, with our teacher shortage and otherwise, it's not as easy to get summer school teachers as it has been in the past as well. And we do have availability of some funds, ESSER 3 funds that specifically can be used for summer programming. And so of those 2.7 million funds, in fact, 20% of them must be used on evidence-based intervention strategies, and summer school qualifies for that. And so we think this would be an excellent use of the funds. And so what we'd like to propose is that for this summer, that all of our full-time summer school teachers, in addition to their normal pay that's covered in the handbook of $25 an hour, that we would like to have an additional $1,000 stipend for the teachers. And we think that would be a really good use of those funds.
Susan Manning?
I would move approval of a $1,000 stipend in additional compensation for all full-time summer school teachers for the 2022 summer school program.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I just have a clarifying question. Is this an additional stipend or is it a stipend in lieu of their hourly rate?
In addition.
Okay, thank you.
We can move to roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next are discussion items. First is the 2021-2022 school operating plan.
Okay, so you've received a number of communications. You've received copies of communications that have gone to families and staff. We did prepare some slides that really summarizes that information. It's nothing new that you haven't seen before. And so I think we'll go through these, really quickly, but that way we'll take time to focus on what you might want to on any of these particular areas. So like I said, I don't think this is new information, but okay, on my screen, I'm not sure I'm seeing the slides.
I think we're seeing the slides.
You are, okay, that's my issue then on my, oh, there they go. Okay, changed my view, thank you. Okay, so like I said, I just want to take a few minutes to go through and then we'll go back to any of these topics that you'd like to have for a particular discussion. All right, so the first slide, again, it provides the context of our operating plan and just a reminder that what the key factors in that first statement. Number one, making sure all along students and staff are safe, physically present, and emotionally supported. So as we looked at these factors, we need to remind ourselves, we know that looking back a year ago, we talked about the idea of keeping students and staff safe. At the time, we thought the best way of doing that, last year, of course, was we had some school closures and we substituted in with virtual education. As we learn more about this pandemic and its effects, we knew going into this school year that it was paramount that we do all we can to have students physically present. And so all the mitigation factors and so on are all the decisions were with the intention of what can we do to keep students in school. And staff as well. And so I think that's really important that we keep that focus about that's really the why in what we've done all along, as well as our latest updates. Okay, vaccination rates. So this has been a real a key part of our decision making that we didn't have a year ago. As the vaccine became available for our staff and our students, we know that not only as far as the importance of having high vaccination rates to help reduce the effects of COVID, but also based upon our quarantining rules. That's one of the things that allowed students to stay in school, that vaccinated students, if they were not showing symptoms, did not need to quarantine. as close contacts, and that was huge, and continues to be. And so the high vaccination, extremely high vaccination rates that we have for high school, middle school students currently, and the elementary schools are continuing to increase, is really positive news for us, and really is a key factor as we make these adjustments to our plan moving forward. And so again, we know that what we are moving to for grades 6, 12, based upon those factors of using the continuing with the recommendation, of masking. We know the positive impact that can have, but we're removing the requirement piece along with the alignment with the public health order change on March 1st. And then grades K-5, and the biggest rationale, again, for a phased approach here is we'd like to see that vaccination rate hopefully continue to climb. And we also know that elementary schools operate a little bit differently than high school and middle school, and just by the nature of how their classes operate. And so that as well, the goal is to reduce having to exclude students from school through quarantining and isolation. And that's why we think those additional 3 weeks can be helpful. And then 4K is still something that we are examining closely. Of course, we have about half of our 4K students are not even eligible for the vaccine yet. We know that they start as 4-year-olds and turn 5 throughout the year, and so that's certainly a key consideration that we have to look at as we determine what to do moving forward with any of our mitigation strategies for 4K. The one thing that I do want to point out, remind everyone that even though we have the 4K programming in our elementary schools, they are much more isolated. Okay, they're here for half days. They don't go to the cafe. They don't have lunch in the schools, and so we are able to isolate our 4K students from our K-5 students in the building. So that's another consideration as we move forward, with our planning on what to do at that grade level. And also a reminder, transportation, that is a federal mandate that still is in effect for now, that masks are still required on our school buses. And then moving forward, we'll continue to update the operating plan. We have to look at, again, the quarantining rules and when students can return to school, having been, with positive cases, and those days 6, 10, but what the requirement with masking. And then we also need to continue our plans as we continue to look at the data moving forward and how that's going to determine our responses moving forward. Okay, and then again, more bullet points with regarding to the next steps and moving forward with and so on. And so we'll continue to monitor and update as we move forward. Okay, I know we went through that really quickly, but as I mentioned, there's really not anything new in there. We've seen a lot of information through memos, through correspondence. We've had conversations. So just wanted to have that as talking points and see what parts of that you have an interest in discussing in more detail. So,
Susan Manning.
And one of the things that we had mentioned was that there are several school districts that at a certain point, at a certain percentage, you go back to a mask for 7 days or 14 days in that particular classroom. And if it's prevalent in a building, then it can go to the building. Can we put some type of language like that so people understand, instead of all of a sudden you say, okay, we got to put a mask on all these kids in this building because the rate's so high, they would know at this point that would happen.
Yeah, so great question. And that absolutely is part of the conversation when we talk about those next steps of determining, what are we going to look at, as the data might change in the future. So a good example, a number of districts, as you mentioned, are using a percentage for positivity with students in buildings or district wide. And a number of districts are using the number 2%. that when they reach a threshold, 2% of the students in a particular building test positive, that they will automatically close the building for 14 days. I will say that I'm a little reluctant to be that rigid. I think that those are really good data points to look at. But for example, if you look at Winnequa School, okay, we've got about 580 students at Winnequa School. And if we use that 2% standard, that's about 11 and a half students. And so suppose we have 12 positive cases for students at Winnequa School out of 580. Would that mean automatically that school should be closed? Well, I think you also have to look at, well, what grade levels do they occur at? And are they clustered? And to automatically say that you're going to close an entire school for something like that, at least I'm a little hesitant. I think that's something that we have to, look at, again, a little bit more than just that one data point.
So Dan, I just want to respond to that. My question wasn't to close a school and on the 2%.
Okay.
The examples I saw were to go back to mandatory masking. It was limited only to that.
Yeah, I apologize. I completely misspoke.
Let's say we're supporting optional masking right now, and there's a certain percentage in a classroom, and people are starting to be uncomfortable with that. It wasn't about closing a building. It was only about in that particular classroom for like 6 days, you go to mandatory masking. That was it.
No, thank you so much. I apologize. I completely misspoke. I did say close schools. I should have said to put in place masking requirements. You're exactly right. I'm not aware of anyone that's looking at school closures, for those kind of rates. I apologize on that.
Susan Fox?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thank you for that response. That's helpful. I wanted to go back to on the slides, the sentence that says we have begun reaching out to families to plan for students who are immunocompromised or have significant health concerns, because we've heard from a couple of those parents. And I'm just wondering what types of options. I mean, I know that students certainly, I'm assuming a number of our students will continue to wear masks. A number of our staff likely may continue to wear masks. I don't know. I think it's important for all students to understand why some students might choose to wear a mask. They may have immunocompromised siblings or members of their family, or they may be so themselves. And I just think that it's important that that be communicated to all students as well. But I'm just wondering why somebody wrote, it's so easy to offer virtual. Well, it's not so easy, as we know. So I'm just wondering if you've begun to talk about what kinds of options there might be, or will that maybe come out of individual conversations with parents, or what thoughts do you have along that line at this point?
Yeah, well, specifically, Krista, do you want to speak maybe to specifically when we talk about students that might be immunocompromised, that we need to make specific accommodations?
Yeah, I think from the planning aspect, of students with health conditions, there's a range of different ways we can make accommodation plans that are pretty student dependent and individual, like team discussion and dependent. And that's going to include sort of the individual student's need, the family's comfort level. We've talked all along the last couple of years about just kind of those range of accommodations that might be necessary for students, like where, yes, many students, I will probably likely be wearing masks. That language that you mentioned around developing safe and encouraging environments for all, no matter what their needs are, working with the individual classrooms and teachers, incorporating distancing, accommodations for eating, just different things within that realm. And then I think if we have situations where a need is so unique that we needed to look through that lens and use a student's plan and IEP of 504, to make some, sort of individualized decisions instructionally, I think we're potentially prepared to do that. But yeah, it is challenging. I think when you think about, there isn't just a virtual option to quote unquote turn to, it's certainly an individualized planning process, no matter what the need is or where the level of concern falls on that continuum, for sure.
Susan, I do see your hand. I don't know, Lisa, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Just happy to answer any questions specifically to virtual if anyone had any, but I think Krista did a nice job covering some of the unique concerns.
Thank you. Susan Manning?
I had talked to Dan. I had the opportunity to talk to some students who are in a community north of Milwaukee who have optional masks right now. And all 4 of the children in that family are wearing masks all the time. So, you know, one of the things you think about is how does that make a student feel when the other students aren't wearing a mask? And particularly the 3rd grade young woman who does have sensitivities to these kinds of things. So it was helpful for me to get that student insight. And she said she felt very comfortable because it made her feel safe to have the mask on. And she is vaccinated fully. But her father did have COVID. So she's had some of those experiences, and she said, it makes me feel comfortable. So if we can make those who want to mask, or those families who want to mask, feel comfortable in that optional environment, and I fully support that our teachers and Krista and Lisa can help within the district to make that happen. I'm very comfortable with the virtual option. And again, these are for students, a variety of ages, 4K, 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade.
Thank you. Elizabeth and then Andrew.
Kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Susan Manning said, I always think about our littlest learners, right? So, you know, elementary age, who like some of whom have their only school experiences, right, have been in the pandemic, or half their school experiences have been in the pandemic. And I'm curious to know what our plans are in terms of supporting students being in a more normal school setting, right? Like, what is it like? How do we support them? And like, now you're going to come to school without a mask and you're still safe and all of those kinds of things. Speaking from my own personal experience, so, you know, my son is a 1st grader, and he's like more diligent about his mask than any person that I know, right? Because it's like part of how he functions in the world now, right? It's part of how he goes to school, it's part of how he does his activities. And so I guess I'm just kind of curious, and I don't know if the principals are on, or if Lisa and Christy, you want to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the PBIS strategies that maybe we utilized at the beginning of the pandemic to socialize kids. Are we going to be using some of those to help sort of off ramp them? And I appreciate having a couple of weeks with our youngest students to be able to do that, because I think, to be honest with you, you know, this kind of now it's done is going to be more impactful to them than it will be to some of our older students that have more experience of normal school. So there's like a really long-winded question. So if you need me to repeat it, let me know.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. What I was like, I think that was definitely embedded in our decision, our desire to have a phased approach with younger learners, and the ability, like the sort of the need to have some of those conversations more universally, and taking into account their developmental levels to have this conversation, and the understanding that there are going to be individuals all along the continuum. There will be students who wear their mask the entire year, and that's going to be completely okay. And there will be students who are ready to move on from that, and that's going to be okay. And those teachers need the tools and capacity to help tailor that to, you know, a kindergarten level conversation, a 5th grade level conversation about how we continue to be a community that's supportive of one another, and meet each other's needs, and take, you know, and for help them understand sort of the safety aspect of why have we done this? Why are we shifting away? But I would say also alternatively, like it is embedded in their culture. You know, we like at the elementary level, you know, kids can roll with the changes and sort of understand some of these things, and have been really very adaptive to the need to wear a mask in the school setting. So in some ways, once we get past those initial conversations, I think it's also a group that is likely to be flexible and responsive to needs if they were to change again too. So just continue to build on sort of that flexibility that they've already demonstrated to this point. But yes, I think it gives us a chance to have some of those conversations and get some of the, maybe the teachers' questions answered about how, making sure that they understand and can respond to, because our kids have good questions and they've got, like, again, a wide range of thoughts and input on their own situation as well.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, Dan, thank you for putting all that information out to the community as we get started with this ending this pandemic here and trying to get to some normalcy. No matter what decision you would have made, some out there in the community who's going to say it's going to be the wrong answer. We do the best we can with what we got, and we try to make the best decisions that we can. The only concern that I have, and I'm going to shout this out to the community because it does start in the home, and this is bullying. I do not want any kids, students or staff, to be bullied wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. That's where I draw the line. I don't like bullies because I've been bullied as a person of color when it's about Black, white issue or Latino, Hispanic. Now we're going to have this mask thing. People do not need to know who's vaccinated and who's unvaccinated, and I don't want that to be started. So what I beg in the community and family, start in the home. Let whoever comes with a mask or who doesn't come with a mask, give total respect to each other in order to get some normalcy. That's all my request is for the families and community that's listening. Do not talk about bullying, and have respect for anyone's decision when they come back to school next week, masked or unmasked. That's all I ask.
Thank you, Andrew. Peter?
What are your thoughts about students who might be at risk, immunocompromised and so on? How do we accommodate them? Dan?
Well, I Krista spoke a little bit earlier. I mean, students who have, specific health issues, they have a health plan and in place. And so, those are all taken care of on a case by case basis. And so I think, even someone who might not have a specific health plan, I think that's still the approach is just like anything else. We try to individualize what we do with every student. And so, so I guess there's a number of different ways that could be approached. I know that's not specific, but I think part of it is because I think it could be very different, depending on what the concern is for every individual student. So specifically, if they have specific, documented medical needs, that's very clearly done. Whether it be through IEP, through a health plan, that's one piece. If it's more anxiety or just discomfort type thing, that's also very important, but that's approached very differently, working with our staff about, how do we come up with a plan then, whether it be to do something differently to help support that student feel safe, or perhaps, some sort of change in schedule. I mean, those are all options that would be on the table.
Yeah, I understand the anxiety issue is different from that of students who have actual issues with, for example, being immunocompromised already. Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, Dan, because we've received some feedback from families that have had concerns that may not have medical issues. If they do have some concerns or additional questions, who should they talk to in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of people and whomever they're most comfortable with. So whether it be directly to the principal, to one of our student services team members, or even a teacher, I think any one of our staff members would be glad to either whether they can deal with it themselves or get them to the right people to have those conversations.
Eric, did you have a question?
I have some comments and a question. Dan, I guess the timing of this, I'm just wondering what brought you to make the decision before this board meeting, knowing that it was a discussion item and you could have heard feedback from the board?
I think our target was always this week for the communication, and as you know, we've had conversations at every board meeting. And so, that the decision, the timing is to communicate with families in enough notice, for the planning moving forward.
Well, if you're going to go by the board meeting and the feedback, this has been a conversation since January, even before that, about a possible transition. So, all right, fair enough. I guess I wish you would have waited till we would have had a little bit more feedback and on that to make that decision. You sent out a survey to the staff and teachers. Is there a reason why we didn't get the survey information as a board?
Yeah, I mean, it was written, so certainly I could, if you would like, share some, themes and so on. So what the survey was, it was really a one open-ended question, about asking teachers to provide feedback. And so, if you'd like, we can certainly share a little bit more specific as far as, what themes were from that feedback. But
well, I would be interested to hear the feedback from, given the gravity of the decision here of what the teachers and staff, how they felt about this too, considering they're right in the middle of this. So I don't know. I can't assume what, if the majority of staff and teachers were in support. You stated, you just asked for feedback of information. Please share thoughts and questions and considerations of the future of Madison schools now that Public Health Madison Dane County has announced the order of March 1st. So I would be kind of curious to see what they said, and I wish I could have had that information prior to that decision. And then that leads me to my next question is, when you had, when we listed on the slides with the vaccination rates from grades K-5, one of the reasons, even though we're at 71% for vaccinations, you said that you're allowing more time for certain families. Did you have feedback that there were families that needed more times to get those vaccinations? Or is that from feedback from the health officials that you consulted with?
Sure. So we've been tracking, for the last, probably 2 months. And we've seen the numbers, continually, steadily rise. And so that's certainly our hope is that will. And I think the also thing is, we know that, there are some families that for whatever reason, the timing of when to make that decision, some have taken more than others. So we thought that by having notice and a date, okay, that if there are parents that are intending to, they at least they know the date that this is going to occur. So there's nothing scientific about that other than, making sure that every parent, understood what was happening in the future. And if that was a consideration for them, that there is, that time yet.
So the timing was a result of that consideration. It had nothing to do with the feedback from the staff and teachers.
Oh, absolutely. It was all those factors that led to that.
So the teacher and staff survey was one of the factors that could have led to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Other than that, what Andrew mentioned before is, that if there's issues with, I think it's important to remember masks, we're strongly encouraging masks. We're not saying don't wear masks. We're strongly encouraging to wear masks. We're following the guidelines from Public Health Madison Dane County, which is what we've continued to do this whole time. So, but I do agree with Andrew that there shouldn't, if there's any issues with students who wear masks, that does fall under harassment and bullying, and it should be treated as such in the schools, because we don't want students that are wearing masks or that need to wear masks for various reasons to feel like, they're being singled out and made fun of and stuff like that. So I think that's an important point that Andrew brought up as well. Other than that, if I'd like to see this teacher and staff survey, I'm curious what that would be. If you can get that to us, that'd be great.
Okay, no other questions? Okay, then we can move on to the 2022-2023 certified staffing plan.
Okay, this is not for action tonight. This is just a preliminary plan to share, and then it will also be updated at our next board meeting. As you know, we're still in the process of having the high school and middle school students finalize their course requests, and so some of those part-time positions and FTE needs will get adjusted at, based upon student needs on that as well. But we did want to share tonight this preliminary plan, and so there are a few different documents that are attached, but the first one that's titled the preliminary staffing is kind of a summary of building by building of what we would like to propose as far as adjustments and primarily increases in staff. And so what we thought is to share this and get, instead of a big presentation, again, let's focus in on the things that you would like to talk to. And so anything that's related, obviously, both Krista and Lisa are a big part of those conversations with anything related to student services or classroom teaching. And we as a team can talk about any one of those positions. But the big thing is, as you would look at those increases, and we'll talk more about specifically budget coming up, but the ESSER 3 funds do provide us some flexibility, we think, as well, to provide some of these new positions. And so we are looking at, significant increases in student services support at the building level. And that was really the overall focus is, we did talk about, district level positions and positions that, support the schools. And the end result was we talked about, we really need a plan. Again, that's how are we supporting students and teachers at the school level? And so that's what these proposals are all about. So instead of going through building by building, why don't we just pause and see which ones you would like to talk about, what questions you have, and we'll be glad to go into in-depth rationale for any of these positions.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One couple for Krista, and then one also for Lisa, and then one for you, Dan. In regards to student services, really excited to see special education coordinator and would love to hear more about your thoughts and vision around that. I'm also curious about our social work FTE. I see, between Cottage Grove School and Granite Ridge, it's like a net of 0, right? So removing a 0.6 and adding a 0.6. And then there's this 0.2 FTE at Glacial Drumlin. And I just, from a FTE perspective, do we have like multiple full-time social workers, or is there a way to bump this up so that becomes a 1.0 FTE? Like, what happened to the other 0.2?
It's the increase at GDS would be from a 0.8 to a 1.0. Yeah. And then the other is a shift of position. So we will, that we have currently, we have that vacancy at MG21, but 5.0 full-time, we would have only full-time and non-shared social work staff.
That's
and
awesome.
the new position from last year, again, would be, we've got every level covered in both communities. We didn't have elementary in Cottage Grove, and so we would still have that full-time. This, again, sort of the tentative, where would it go? Having that role at Granite Ridge, we would still have a full-time 1.0 social worker who would be at Granite Ridge, but also representing the elementary level in Cottage Grove. So
does this mean that we have all 3 student services reps, so not counting nurses, right? So counselor, social worker, and psych in both communities at all sites or nearly all sites?
Well, the exception, right? So Taylor Prairie and Cottage Grove, just due to their size, they don't have 3 full-time FTE. So so that's like kind of the gold standard or the goal, right? Like, and we've really shifted in that direction to have all roles represented. We do have, with that unique configuration, like we're a ways away from probably having, a ways away from having 3.0 FTE, and then how you share those roles and what the roles are. It's really about what we need in the buildings. And I think multiple roles could fit in those places. We've talked individually, had conversations just about individuals and roles and fit, but just know that, what all of these proposals and even the vast majority of it, those roles, it really is around what the needs are and how we think we can meet them and fit and getting some fit with positions.
That's awesome. It's really exciting. So then my second question or follow-up question is, talk to me about your thoughts and vision around a special ed coordinator.
Yes. So we have
other than help, Krista.
Yes. Well, yes and yes. So we do, I really, and Lisa may want to jump in too here because there's this coordinator piece. So we have a 1.0 special ed coordinator. That's a relatively new position. That person currently serves early childhood through transition. So the entire district. And, that position has evolved in a few iterations, but really like beyond the immediate need of technical support, coaching and mentoring for special education and process wise and managing all of that piece. That role really has been one of our critical like coaching and support roles. And I think for our ICS work, a conversation Lisa and I were having, like just that ability, like we're at such a tipping point of we've invested so much, we're on the verge of doing some really great things, but a gap that we have identified is just like when we can get our folks, including us, into the buildings and working more directly with teams, like that's an ongoing need for the future. So from that special ed lens, we really have a group of folks who have the understanding, the commitment, as you saw, like to the non-negotiables, to the work. There is a technical and a learning piece around meeting the needs of individuals with disabilities through co-planning. And so a huge impetus for the second piece is to help get those, it would be 2 individuals out into the buildings more and meeting with teams and having that not be the first thing that goes off your schedule when your schedule gets booked up with other work. But that ability also to specialize. There are some differences, as you know, between the way our elementaries work and our teams function. And then the secondary, it is different with just block scheduling and how our secondary students spend their day. And then on the special ed realm, like the 2 tail ends, like I like to call it, early childhood really is sort of a specialty. And we've got some exciting, I think, ideas and some work we want to do there. And then our students who are transitioning from like high school and that 18 to 21-year-old program. And we've got a team there that's really interested in doing some specialized work, but that is a lot. That is a lot for one person and one team to kind of manage from that lens. So I think the biggest goal is that support for ICS and co-planning. I would say the only other thing I want to say really specifically is that in special education, it tends to be, we've had the privilege of adding some positions, but there is typically some new staff. Our coordinator spends a lot of time with our mentors support our new hires really, really well, but there are just some aspects of working as a special education teacher that are unique to the role. And we've got a lot of new people who are either new pathway for them, new licensure, brand new to the field. I would say she spends quite a bit of time mentoring, training, and doing sort of on-site and on the job training for our special education teachers, as well as, our new student services members as well. Our current person has a student services background. I think that split, we work pretty seamlessly, student services and special education together, but
well, that was kind of a follow-up question. So we'll have 2 FTE in special ed coordination then, right? An ad. And I'm curious to know if kind of what your thoughts were. I'm assuming you thought this and then dismissed it. So I'm curious to know, like, why another special ed coordinator as opposed to something around student services? And then you can kind of have an integrated suite, right, of like CNI and special education and student services as like a unit, like a triumvirate, I guess. I don't know. That was like a really weird way to describe 3 professionals.
No, and we did really specifically talk about that. And I think our desire was like, we have like, I think under the umbrella of ICS, you don't want to feel siloed and having a special education, sort of coordinator style, but it's an existing position that's really, I think, valued and well received. And I guess in terms of like what the need is, we just need more and more of a specialty. But to emphasize, I would say that role, like we work very closely together and with our student services and equity coordinator and with CNI. So that role it's not limited, and we're not looking for another like very limited lens around like, either level and special ed, but it is very supportive of the whole team. Our entire team, our current coordinator and student service equity coordinator, we sort of co-plan and facilitate our student services team meetings, our SLP, OT, like our specialties, like it is very much a team approach. So we'd want to continue that and kind of all under the umbrella of student services. But people are familiar with what a special education coordinator does. That's just the position that's been around and the most understood, I think. So to be quite honest, I just wanted to be clear about that delineation between elementary, secondary as being our biggest goal, but keeping a lot of the things under the umbrella the same.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. I have other questions, but I'll pause because I've already taken up a lot of time to see if any of my colleagues have questions, and then I'll circle back.
Eric?
These are all for the 2022, 2023 school year, Dan, is that correct?
That's correct.
So they'll be posted in the summer or whatever.
Yeah, so what we're hoping is we'll come back at the next board meeting 2 weeks from now, ask for approval at that point, and then some of these begin posting immediately in March. You know, there is a little bit, as you know, with the market, some need to get going here soon.
Right. Okay.
Peter and then Susan Fox.
The big change on the staffing plan is the addition is really essentially is the addition of 3 school counselors. My question for Krista, as we've talked about, is what is this going to enable you to do that you can't do now?
Yeah, great question. I think to your point earlier about sort of meeting those more immediate mental health needs of students, I'll just say, so, you know, meeting with principals and talking through like, you know, the big theme across the board, and even when Dan and I met, like when I meet with my colleagues, like how are you adjusting student services staffing plan to respond to the real and immediate shift and needs due to the pandemic? Because truthfully, the needs to support student mental health and wellness on a universal level, it was a need a couple of years ago. There is a real increase in the need to support students, staff, and families. So how do you quantify that? I mean, we use sort of a ratio model as our talking point for when do we think we need to add? We're getting up above this point. Let's talk about this. You know, I think there's ways to look at it like that just needs to shift downward across the board. So I would say that this plan reflects that shift downward, and that just like, look, we know what the needs are. We need the more capacity to meet them and to be more proactive. And that's the second piece of it is the unmet need is, and it's not completely unmet because our teams are really doing the very best they can, but we know and recognize that there's more on a universal level and on a proactive level that we could be doing with more capacity for staff. So instead of being left to respond reactively and to sort of triage and meet the most immediate needs in front of you, you know, there's elements of conversation around, you know, at the secondary level, like how can we, when we identify a student need, whether it's through like our screener, a teacher referral, a parent, and we're getting referrals and information from a lot of places, how do you, you know, what would be sustainable? How can you sort of set a short-term problem-solving plan, ways to check in with students? How can we more thoughtfully and proactively coordinate with our external resources and the places that our students are seeking, you know, outside supports or returning from treatment, you know, some of the specific gaps we have. And at the elementary level, we're going to talk a lot, you know, next year on our curriculum renewal cycle, and as well as before then about, you heard sort of from Granite Ridge, a little reference about our embedded SEL, our social emotional learning piece. So that capacity to continue to grow that work, that, you know, we'll talk in our workshop too. I think one of the huge successes of the pandemic is that we moved forward with a more embedded SEL instructional model. And what it's really shown us is like how much further we can even go with this. So that's really, I think, around those counseling positions. It's a little bit of breathing room to be more out in front of and proactive toward meeting the needs of students before things necessarily become a crisis level. And our folks are, you know, again, doing those things. I would say it's, you know, in the day to day, there are a lot of competing demands for student services. And, you know, while student needs come first, there are more of them than there have been potentially in the past.
I'm kind of curious if you, clearly I mean, we've changed the staffing plan in response to a need, which I think is great. And then I'm wondering if when you did this, that you documented the articulation of that need, and if that's something you might share with us. I mean, I've heard what you said, and it's a pretty good understanding. I'm just wondering if there's documentation around that, or further details, because I think it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, I do think for the mental health workshop, probably will be able to articulate that a little bit more,
Well,
and
how
probably
do
in
you-
some written ways.
Essentially, I'd like to hear the justification. I'd like to see the
Mhm.
justification for adding 3 FTEs in this area. It's a big change. I think it's an important one, and it sounds like you know what you're doing. I'm just wondering if there's documentation about what the expectations are and what you're expecting. The expectations are for these 3 positions. It's rare that we see such a big change to a staffing on the staffing plan. That's not just this isn't just enrollment. You're increasing by almost 50% the counseling resources that we have, and it's a significant change. And
It is, and I think I think it's that glow. So 2 years ago, we met with each individual. Look, we really carefully planned our staffing plan for the addition of Granite Ridge, and that was a big opportunity for us to think about future needs and what might we. And I think we staffed pretty. We were feeling good about it. It was maybe somewhat cautious. I do think, to be transparent, I think there's a little bit of future oriented staffing in this plan of staff for the growth we know is coming, and staff, knowing that the needs aren't going to shift. And it is also responsive to our best effort, and then COVID impacting sort of what we thought our best effort was. And in a couple of places, I don't think we currently have the right FTE, and that's where some of the shifts are reflected. And then when you compare, it's just like domino effect, right? Community to community at those elementary positions. And then, the secondary is a conversation we've been having all along as well. So, yeah,
and I'll
it's a
just add
bigger picture conversation for sure.
Yeah, and one of the parts of the conversation that I was part of with Krista and the principals, for that matter, as Krista mentioned, when Granite Ridge came online, she did a great job of looking at all of our ratios and all the buildings, and so looking at the number of FTEs, for our student services staff. And then what we realized is even though the ratios all look great, when you have part-time positions, that can be a challenge, and shared staff. And so one of the, I think, conclusions that we had is that in those cases where those needs are, it's kind of almost, we need a whole person that's available 5 days a week. The student needs don't just happen on Monday through Thursday, because we have an 80% person there on those 4 days of the week. So there's a little bit of that as well, of just having that capacity of our staff available, at all times for our students. And then, as Krista mentioned, I mean, part of it is really enrollment driven as well, and looking ahead to the growth that we expect. But so that's part of it. And and as Krista mentioned, I mean, she talked about the rest of the rationale.
Susan Fox?
Yeah, I think there's been a feeling for a while where our ratios may not have been out of kilter, that they were never great in terms of, I mean, guidance counselors have always had way more kids than they can really relate to on a regular basis, other than, I think about the high school, all the academic counseling, all that stuff that comes in, and then there's all those other needs. So I think this totally makes sense. But I guess the other question I had was about the math coach at the district level. I'm just wondering, Lisa, maybe you could say a little bit about that, if that's going to be more, so that one could be more elementary and one is similar to the special ed coordinator, if that's part of the thinking, or if you could just say more about that.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you. You met Matt Hayden earlier tonight in the presentation from Granite Ridge. So currently we have one district math coach. To put that in perspective, we have 11 reading FTE and one math coach. And so Matt, you can imagine, is pushing into as many co-planning meetings as he can. He's supporting as many grade levels as he can. And we're in the middle of a math adoption. And what became really clear is he needs some help getting to the places where we need to be to have conversation, to support high quality math instruction. The resource adoption is going to make a big difference across the board. We're really excited about that. But we also want to make sure that the implementation, once we purchase a new foundational resource, goes smoothly. And so just adding another math coach will make a world of difference. And it is one of our highest priorities from CNI.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense to me. I just wanted to hear your whole explanation. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Manning and then Elizabeth. And nothing. Okay. Elizabeth?
Oh, hi, Megan. Yeah, thanks for the explanation on the math coach. I was wondering about that too. And there's like such a literacy bias, right? So it's so nice that we're going to get another math person and that Matt's going to have a little bit of help. Team of one over there. Question that I have about the EL teacher. Can you talk a little bit about what the increase of that is and what the rationale is for that increase? Whether it's Lisa or Krista, I'm not sure.
I can talk a little bit, and then, Krista, certainly you can add to it. So we have not added official EL staff in actually quite some time. What has happened over the years is sometimes when, particularly in world language, when we have some shifting allocation, depending on how many sections of a particular world language is running, there may be some EL adjustment because a few of our Spanish teachers in particular also are EL certified. However, that's not something that really lends itself to effective long-term programming. And so the other mention earlier tonight about the difficulty when you have shared staff, trying to, again, account for the needs in multiple buildings, travel time, et cetera. Knowing that needs in a building can arise any day, not just on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 until noon. Those types of things really make our ability to meet the needs of our multilingual learners challenging. So this dedicated FTE again, is very important to help ensure that we're meeting the needs of our learners.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good to know. And yeah, definitely can't meet the needs of kids like, when it fits into my schedule, when I'm not currently teaching Spanish, come and see me. And then last question I have, and this one's for you, Dan, or Reed, if he's still here too. Talk to me about why we need an associate principal at Granite Ridge, and will this replace the TOSA position, or are we continuing to keep the TOSA position that is there?
Yeah, so we would keep the TOSA position, and the TOSA position, and we could probably talk about that a lot. There's a number of things that when we designed those positions, we wanted our TOSAs to be able to do, and as instructional coaches, it was a big part of that. And then also they provide some support, behavioral, students' behavioral support. And in the schools where we have associate principals, of course, they're able to focus a lot more on that instructional, support with our staff. And so that's the model that we've had in the schools where we do have APs. So the recommendation is purely about enrollment and capacity. And so on the document that we shared, the numbers are a little bit different than the previous one that you saw when we did open enrollment in January. This one Jared took and put in added in the open enrollment seats that were approved by the board. Now, some of those are projections, obviously. We won't necessarily fill all of those seats, but this is kind of on a high end of what it could look like. And as you see, Granite Ridge potentially could be really approaching 500 kids next year, about 480. And that's a really big elementary school. And there's not a magic number. So we look at the number of staff members that we have, the capacity of the principal to well-supervised staff, but as well as that many students means that there's that much more kind of going on in the building, so to speak, So, so we've, honestly, the plan was 3 years ago that we would be looking to add this position when Granite Ridge opened. We put that on hold because we actually did have a small class come through, and then we lost some students, temporarily through the pandemic. And so that's why we felt it wasn't quite, as needed at that time. But now that we're pretty confident that enrollment growth is coming, we believe now is the time.
Great, makes sense. I'm really excited about this staffing plan. I think it looks great. I'm excited that we're getting more student services. I'm really excited that we're getting more CNI support. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to kind of move more into that instructional coaching model, across the board. So I think it's great. I hope you all are excited about it.
We are, and I'll just say this, when we started these conversations a couple months ago, at that point, it really, in my mind, we weren't going to be adding this number of positions. It would have been, what was really needed to maintain our class size, and then kind of on the fringes, what might we build, add a little bit, part-time FTE here and there. And not that we had a windfall by any means, and with the ESSER money, because we know we still have that financial cliff coming a year from now. That hasn't gone away. So I want to be clear that we're going to have some challenges, but in the short term, yeah, we did get more than expected with the ESSER funds, and that provided a little bit more flexibility. By no means do I think, obviously this is not frivolous at all. These are needed positions, but we've been operating on such tight budgets, for so long, and that balance of adding staff versus, paying our staff, right, fairly and being competitive. And so, so it was nice that at least for next year, we have a little bit of relief that we can, manage this in our budget, and knowing we're going to have challenges ahead, but we can't hold back on staff now with the idea of, well, we're going to have budget challenges a year or two from now. We're going to have those regardless, and we have student needs right now that need to be met. So we're as well. We're excited about. I think this is a really good plan that I think is going to benefit our kids.
All right, there doesn't appear to be any other board questions. So thank you, Krista and Lisa and Jared, for being available to answer all of our questions. All right, we can move on to meeting dates. They are listed in board docs. Our next meeting is on March 2nd. All right, can I have a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.